Hello and welcome to 3 Minute Gaming. I'm Nathan, and today I'm going to tell you if this game's worth your time and bandwidth. Today's game is Dead Space 2023, the remake. Turns out remakes are the hot thing now, with the next one on the docket being EA's 2008 Dead Space. Is this upgrade worth picking up, or should you stick to the original? The Dead Space remake is available on PC, Xbox Series consoles, and PlayStation 5, where it will set you back $70. I will mention up front, the Xbox Series S version only runs at 30 FPS, and the game is about 10 to 12 hours long. So what exactly is Dead Space? Well, it's a remake of the original Dead Space game, both being third-person horror action shooters with an emphasis on precision limb targeting and exciting set pieces. Now, I recently did a full review of the original Dead Space where I go into more detail about the mechanics and such, but I will say that the remake's core gameplay loop is basically identical. You are Isaac Clarke trapped on a mining ship, the Ishimura, that has been taken over by necromorphs, gross human mutations which have to be dismembered to be killed. So for this review, I'm going to focus specifically on what has been changed or improved since the original. The first big change is the story. Isaac is no longer a silent protagonist, so instead of just being everybody's gopher like in the first game, he contributes more to the decision-making and is a much more proactive character. Additionally, Hammond and Kendra, Isaac's fellow survivors, have been fleshed out significantly, and there are more side characters than the original game that play into the game's story as well. Another good change is that the crazy unitologist doctor, who kind of showed up near the end of the original game, has a more prominent role throughout, making him a more interesting antagonist, and Isaac's girlfriend Nicole also has a larger role in the plot. Gameplay-wise, the loop is identical, with a few minor tweaks. You will still be dismembering limbs, but rather than sell you your weapons, the game just gives them to you at various points of the plot, encouraging you to try them all out, unlike the first game. Weapon upgrades also have significant unique upgrades similar to Dead Space 2, such as adding fire to the plasma cutter, which further enhances gameplay. Pacing has also been slightly tweaked. In the original game, you would end the chapter by hopping on the tram and going to the next zone, but now the ship's more interconnected and you can go back to these old areas to pick up stuff that you missed. This gets bumped up as the game has a few minor side objectives you can complete for more story, as well as Isaac getting higher security clearance which lets you open up things you couldn't get previously. It's very light Metroid-y, but definitely makes the ship feel more interconnected. Lastly, some of the game's more obnoxious sections have been adjusted, specifically that horrible asteroid turret section. That's the one achievement I don't have on the 360 version, though I figured I would mention it. So overall, the Dead Space remake is essentially the same as the base game, which was already very good, even in 2023, but with a bunch of improvements to round out the rough edges, a new coat of paint, and an injection of more story. So what do I like about Dead Space 2023? Well, this game looks incredible. The original was already a technical marvel on the 360 and PS3, but this remake really ups it with fantastic lighting, fog effects, and so on, and the gore has been ramped up significantly. Like the force gun literally blows the skin off of enemies, leaving just the flesh underneath. It's like the grossest thing I've ever seen. I love it. Additionally, I felt that all the changes they made really fell in line with the vision of the first game, particularly the story improvements, and they significantly help with the game's pacing, as well as make Isaac much more relatable as he endures this hell. And lastly, at its core, this is still Dead Space, one of the best single-player third-person shooters ever made, and the game still evokes these feelings and is just as fun, if not funner to play than the 2008 original. When it comes to the bad, checkpoints seem to have been adjusted so that they're further apart, which led to more than a bit of frustration for me, particularly because I found this game to be harder than the original game, especially early on. Additionally, while I did like the ability to freely explore the Ishimura, it does kind of screw with the original's immaculate pacing, as revisiting areas just kind of have random spawns rather than the focused theme park ride of the rest of the game. And lastly, I encountered more than a few bugs on the console version, including audio cutting out, enemies spawning in walls, some enemies not dying or just having bad AI, and so on. As you know, I rank games here on a 3-point scale, must play, maybe consider, don't bother. Now, I went to Dead Space optimistic but concerned. The 2008 game to me held up so well, it seemed a weird choice to remake. However, I was pleasantly surprised by how significant these changes made Dead Space better, while still staying true to the original game. As someone who played the original Dead Space recently, this absolutely feels like a definitive edition, and as such, I would consider it a horror masterpiece. I highly recommend checking the Dead Space remake out. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you played Dead Space, the original Dead Space, I have a review of the entire series on the channel, so check that out if you want. But regardless, let me know in the comments and go give Dead Space a look.